Okay, so we need to elect a committee chair first.
I nominate Molly Abraham.
Second? Okay. Accept.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. And I think I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to,
Yeah, I'll kick us off and then
Okay.
let the team take it away. But welcome, everybody. Good evening. We're excited to host you in the Center for Innovation, one of the kind of newer spaces we have outfitted now for staff professional development. So we thought it was a good time to get you guys in here and let you see it a little bit. We will do a tour at the end if anybody wants to stick around for that. But really what we wanted to spend some time talking to you guys about today is some of our HRS work, high reliability schools, and our progress with that work. And so we're thankful to have a couple building principals here tonight to share their experience with that too. Amber Dobbs at Wickham and Michelle Cook from Southeast. And with that, I'll let the team jump in and take it away. So.
Yeah, so last year, in the fall, kind of late fall, we gave you an update on where we were with HRS at that point. And so our goal this evening is to just kind of share where we've been and where our work is going to take us the remainder of this year and the beginning of next year. So we'll do some HRS updates. We are going to talk about some of our level 1 certification. We do have 4 buildings that have been certified. 2 of them are here, and then City High School and Borlaug Elementary. So all 4 of those buildings have gone through the certification process and are certified, and they will have the opportunity to share with you, and then the opportunity for you to ask any questions about that certification process. And then just an opportunity to ask some questions. So this is what we have shown all throughout our HRS journey. But what we wanted to do was to just really focus in on kind of where we've been and where we currently are. So you can see these are the 3 levels that we are committed to as a district within high reliability schools. We have outlined our 3 objectives in each of those levels. So in level 1, our objectives that our schools are safe, supportive, and collaborative for all students and staff. And then you can see that this year we are working on certification, which means that we're committed to the process of proving or improving the results of those 8 leading indicators. At level 2, our objective is that we will have a model of instruction that we use to define quality instruction in our buildings so that teachers can self-assess, continue to improve, and then have an impact on student achievement. And then our overall objective in level 3 is that all students will have the opportunity to learn the same content, and teachers will have adequate time to teach the required content. And so then you can see on that timeline the work that has occurred in level 2 and is currently occurring with some NASA introduction. And Deputy Superintendent Ramey, I don't know how formal we get these ones, he's going to talk a little bit about level 2 and what we have upcoming. And then Carmen and her team is doing an amazing amount of work in level 3 with priority standards, starting to think about proficiency scales as it ties back to our professional learning communities and collaborative teams.
Is it okay if I stay right here? Is that all right? Okay. You all have this memorized, I'm sure, but when we look at the 8 leading indicators for level 1, as we've gone through our work, we prioritized 3 of them, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.4. But as you're going to hear from our 2 buildings that have gone through the certification process, they can't only focus on those 3. They have to provide examples and narratives and more examples and more narratives about through each of the 8 leading indicators, and what we call lagging indicators are those pieces of work, the quick data that help highlight or support each of those leading indicators. We talked about this a little bit at last Tuesday's board meeting, but the certification process is all about proving and improving. As we've had these discussions about how are we going to celebrate and communicate the amazing celebrations of the buildings as they become certified, we want to make sure that we communicate certification doesn't mean perfection. We can't be confused that just because a building becomes certified, that our buildings are not going to have any issues, no problems that we're going to have to navigate over the course of months and years. So not to say that these 2 buildings are not going to highlight perfect examples, but it's important to understand that the whole process is about proving and improving. Having done this process like 6 or 7 years ago, very well aware about the hours that the two here have put in, as well as the hours that their team put in. So this is not an effort that can be taken on by one person, but it's an amazing process that highlights the work of your entire team and your entire building. So as you can see there, again, it's all about living through HRS, not necessarily just focused solely on certification. That's our end goal for the teams, obviously, that highlights the work that they're doing, but certainly it's not the end goal for the work that's going to be encompassed over the next few years. I apologize. Eliza told me I made up some words, like words that don't exist in the English language at the Tuesday board meeting. I apologize. I'm only going to use actual English language.
What's wrong with that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I was like, gosh, he's used this in a couple different settings. I've never quite heard this word.
Yeah, it's okay.
He made it up, so there's that.
Nobody said anything, so I appreciate that. Thank you
I
all.
wish I did.
Oh, come on, what word was it? Now I gotta know.
Chunkade.
Oh, yeah.
Chunkade.
I do remember
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I used it twice.
Truncated?
Truncate, huh? Okay,
That-
truncate.
Yeah, sorry about that. But feel free to use it. Okay.
It's a chunky truncation.
Eliza, do you want to introduce the first building?
Yeah, we have Amber Dobbs, who is our fantastic principal over at Wickham, and we gave she and Michelle these 4 things that we just kind of wanted them to talk through. So I will turn it over to Amber. Which document would you like me to go into?
You can click on the first one. I'm going to be really transparent. When I got the email from Eliza and Lucas about presenting, I was like, I don't know. And then I kept reading the email and it was like, we just get to talk about level 1 HRS and the certification process. And I'm like, okay, I can talk about that all night, right? So I'm really happy to be here and I think the certification process for me was about showcasing the work that we're already doing. And so I get to showcase it again in front of you. But I would take us back like a year and a half as we first started talking about HRS and the framework. I immediately started working with staff on what are we already doing within each of these leading indicators that we can just enhance or make improvements to, or really just analyze and make sure that we're doing the right work. And so this document that I linked here is just what we initially did. We sat down as a staff and we really made sure that we understood what each of those indicators were asking, and then we just made a list of everything that we felt like as a system we were already doing in that area. And we wrote a description, which I'm so glad we did, because as part of the certification process, you have to have the description, and so we were doing the work for the certification, and we didn't really know we were doing it at that time. And then on this document, we also linked, because I figured we would need it, we linked like our body of evidence or like a artifact for each of those. So we certainly don't have to go through all of this, but you can see for each indicator, that was just indicator 1, and then it goes into 1.2. So you can see all of the things that as a building we were doing. I think the thing that, it wasn't a challenge for us, that's not the right word. The thing where we probably grew the most in thinking about those leading indicators was in the quick data, right? So you can see that we felt as a staff that we had a lot of systems in place. So we started analyzing those systems, and the question we would ask ourselves was, we have it, but how do we know we can sustain this, or how do we know that it's working? And then that pushed us to our quick data to, give just the little dipstick every once in a while to make sure that the systems are working effectively. So that was part of the process. And then Lucas kind of alluded to this a little bit in that this was never just an Amber project. I could have, in thinking about the certification process, I probably could have this summer and at the start of the school year just sat down and completed the whole thing. It would have taken me hours. I could have done that work myself, but this isn't just my work, and so I did include the entire staff in our certification process. We do have an HRS team at Wickham, so we got together and we kind of mapped out what do we want to have completed by winter break, what do we want to have done by the end of the school year. And once we started working on it, we got back together and we're like, we don't need to take until the end of the school year. We can, let's just get, I don't want this to sound bad, but let's get it done, right? Like, we have everything there, and once we figured out the system for submitting, then it was just a matter of completing the work and uploading it into the system. So this document just shows all of the links to each of our assignments, and then we kept track of, is it done, is it submitted, and has it been approved, the initial approval. You can see that in the submitted, there are a couple X's in some areas. That's because we did submit something and it didn't get approved, and we were like, what? What's happening? Why wasn't it approved? And then we realized very quickly why it wasn't, and then went back and submitted it again. So,
Amber, can you give an example of what that might have been or what they were looking for?
well, the first time we submitted, I think 1.B, and I actually uploaded like a 1.D to the 1.B, and it wasn't accepted. Another one was, what was that? Was 1 point, lagging indicator. Oh, in HRS 1.8 for B, we talked about in our video technology, but we had not submitted anything for technology in the actual presentation. So we talked about it in the video, but we didn't have evidence of it in the presentation. So just had to go back and add that. So we had everything. It was just a matter of figuring out the system in the building in which we were going to submit it to the Moodle, and then waiting patiently for the approval or to resubmit.
Amber, do you mind sharing what the different tasks are, the A, B, C, D tasks?
Yeah, so the 1.1, or the A task was always data. So you had to put your data in there as to whether or not that was a strength area for you as a building. And so we just used the survey results for each of the categories of people that took the survey. So it was the students, the parents, my survey data, and then the staff survey data. So you had to submit that, and then our last slide was the summary of that. Is it a strength area, and then why are you saying it's a strength area? Or if it's an area for improvement, you just have to summarize it there. So that was the A assignments, and then B was simply a slide indicating whether it was a strength or not a strength. So B assignment, or not B, I'm so sorry, that's C. The B assignments were what I would call the body of evidence, right? Like proving that you have that the lagging indicator is what it is. And so we submitted, in most areas, 6 or 7 pieces of evidence or lagging indicators. So that's the B assignment. The C assignment was, is it a strength or not? That was the easiest one. So you just had to indicate whether it was an area of strength or not. And then the last one is always a video reflection. And so we had different people do the videos. So I did a couple of them. Our school counselor did one. Our IDS did one. We had a teacher submit one. And then for 1.4, which is the PLCs, we had to record each of the PLCs. So we had started recording last year because I knew that was coming into this year. And so you had to upload, I think, 4. But we told the staff we're uploading all of them because we're all doing the PLC work. So we uploaded quite a few videos there. For me, the 4 looks different because that was the first one that we submitted. We felt like as a building, our PLCs were a strength, and we wanted to start there. And so we submitted that one in a different way, and then we figured out a better system. So that's why 1.4 looks a little different on this particular document. So I would say overall, the certification process it's a little time consuming in that you're submitting assignments, but it's all work that we had ready. We just needed to put it in the right format in order to submit it. And then for me, it was it's the work of everybody. So I'm not just going to do this on my own. I'm going to involve basically the entire staff in completing this, which meant that I had to not be competitive and be the first person done. I had to be okay with the fact that it was whenever we got it done, which felt good in the end. So, what else can I tell you about it? What questions do you have about the certification process or the?
Molly, is it okay with this?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this slide, labeled leading indicator 1.1. Let's see this.
I think the first document open.
Yeah, it is, right.
That one, yeah.
Yes, okay, so this leading indicator is that faculty and staff perceive the school environment is safe and orderly. And we're trying to relate what we're looking at here today with what I've heard from parents and students and the community members. Okay, so I'm looking at the list of lagging indicators, and one I see is staff and student supervision before and after school. So could you say anything about if student conduct before and after school was not always what you wanted to see or expected to see, and if doing this work, putting staff in strategically placed positions before and after school, if that has made a difference in the student conduct and how we are to assess that? Does that make sense?
It does, it does. We did change that system, mostly because of COVID, to be honest. So it used to be that we would have we call it all hands on deck at the beginning and the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, students used to come and line up outside the building. We would have staff there to supervise. As a result of COVID, instead of students outside, they actually come into the classroom. So it's more of a soft start to the school day. So that system has changed, and we've seen a direct result of less morning office referrals because they're coming into an environment that is what I would call their safe environment within the school with their classroom teacher as the direct supervisor. So I think as far as systems goes, going through the level 1 process and really taking a step back and looking at all the systems you have in place and determining as a staff whether or not through data they're working or not, and then making adjustments. That adjustment honestly was because of COVID, but it has improved our system that students are able to come in, and that we strategically still have staff members around the entire building, but they're coming into their classroom where the teacher is supervising.
Okay, so all of it was a result of what we needed to do for COVID. That was something we could have devised, or you could have devised on your own.
Absolutely. Could have.
Okay, so thanks.
Yeah.
Mitch Lingo, I'm sorry I wasn't here to introduce myself. Work ran late. Question on the after-school duty. When you say all hands on deck, how long does that usually take after school? Is it like teachers there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
At Wickham, it takes us till about 3:10 because that's when our afternoon car line ends.
Okay.
I guess my question to Brady was, is this a contract? But he said it's working on it.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Did before.
The difference between supervision and teaching, yeah, there
Right.
is, yeah.
Because part of you thinks, well, we should do that everywhere, but I just imagine trying to put something like that in place.
Yeah, we still are very careful around, even though it's supervision,
Yeah.
we still look at the full day and think, okay, this teacher, even supervision into teaching is going up to 3 hours, so we make sure that their recess is covered or
Right.
that
Gotcha.
they're breaking in some way, yeah. But that was, or that they're heading to lunch at 10:45, so that, or 10:40, so that it
Brunch.
doesn't go over
We
the
always
3
brunch.
hours. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you cover the students that are lingering on, for whatever reason it may be that a parent's running late, or they just don't want to walk home at that point? And I'm coming from a middle school background where
Sure.
we had students that just hung out for 30 minutes on the ground until we had to really just kind of push them out.
Or
Hours.
Yeah.
Hours.
We don't see much of that at elementary.
Yeah, I don't think you can
Yeah,
go ahead.
because we have older siblings that are
Mhm.
taking a man, or I don't know if Michelle has any.
But
Yeah, I
usually
mean, we
with
see
the
that,
office,
but.
Yeah,
They'll typically wait in the office.
they come early and they stay.
I think for us as a building, we felt like we had some pretty strong systems in place. I think what level one provided for us was a chance to slow down a little bit, take kind of a step back and give ourselves an entire year to really analyze those level one systems, knowing that that's the foundation, right? If we don't have that, then in order to get to that teaching piece and really make a difference in our data, that has to be there. So it really did give us a time to stop and reflect, and again, go back to the, what are we doing every once in a while to assess our current systems to make sure that they're still the right systems and we're doing the right work, so. And the certification was just a piece, right? But it sure was a nice way to showcase everything that we've been doing. And we did include everything. As you can see from that first document, we had listed probably 20 things in 1.1. But when we did the certification, we really focused on about 7. And so we had so much more to showcase, but it would have taken a very long time to put all 20 on there, so. Yeah.
All right, yeah, and I copied Amber's document there, and I just linked our Moodle slides. We used our storage slides to sort of show, I guess, store our work all the time, and that was a really large, clunky document, so I didn't link that, I can, but that's just our storage slides. But a couple of things that I thought about when I was thinking about, talking to you today is the HRS work in our building. Like, I just remember going to San Antonio for the kickoff, was it like 2 years ago that we went, and coming back so excited. But the first thing, the light for me was, we are already doing so much of this work, but I am making an awful lot of assumptions, like the whole 1.1, like teachers know emergency drills. And I came back and I was like, we'll do a tornado drill, it'll be fine. Nobody knew where to go. Like, we had it all posted in their classrooms, but it was things that I just realized I was making a lot of assumptions on, that HRS just really forced us to be accountable. And again, that data piece was huge. And so right away, I mean, I literally, within the first week we got back, we did a fire drill, a tornado drill, we cleaned all of that up. We realized, in the middle school, we have 800 and some kids. Sometimes we have student situations in the hallway where we need some privacy. And those were areas where I just thought, we are assuming that everybody knows what to do, everyone knows what's going on. And it was just, I don't want to say easy, but it was a quick win for us to just clean some of that up and say, hey, this is the script we want you to use. If we say, please close your door, this is what we want you to tell kids. We're going to come on afterwards. And so I think, for me, what I really liked about my initial grab with HRS is, this is a way for me to know with the data immediately if something is working, instead of just assuming that it's working. We did find a lot of things that we already had in place that were working, especially for 1.1 and 1.2, that's student safety and staff safety. But there was just some accountability piece, and then the surveying. I mean, we surveyed last year before all the rules, our staff and our students all the time about how do you feel. We did what we called quick checks, and so, for instance, 1.1 and 1.2 about feeling safe and secure and supported. We had surveys that we gave almost every 6 weeks, particularly around the hallways, because we know that 850 kids passing at the same time can feel very chaotic, and then about support. And so we would get that data from the students, we would turn around within a week, give it back to them in homeroom and say, what are some ideas, what do you need from us in the hallway, we'd implement, and then we'd immediately assess again and see, is what we're doing making a difference. So for me, I think the certification process, and for my whole building, it was that idea of, we can implement something and immediately see if it's working. We don't have to wait until the end of the year when we get the culture and climate survey back or our ISASP data. There were ways to check. I think one thing that I'm super proud of is that it was such a collective effort. When we started, I think back now, we do have an HRS team, but my HRS team I'm the only person left on it that was there when we started, because my whole admin team has changed, my IDS have changed, my teacher leaders that were on it have changed, and so from start to finish, it's a completely new team except for me. And the fact that we were able to get certified early in this year, I think is just a testament to the amount of work. When we go through our slides, like when we submitted them to Moodle, one of the things that we did in 1.B, which is our lagging indicators, is we had interviews with teachers and students for every single area, just saying, what is, for instance, the hallway data, we would interview students about that, or our PBIS lessons for SOAR expectations. And so it truly was a collective effort and not something that I think I absolutely could have done on my own. And when we were really close at the end, we did get 1.8 sent back to us also. And it was because, and I think every building has, because I've heard a lot of people ask me, what did you have to do? But it was the same thing. It was like, okay, you only submitted stuff for, I think, budget. I need to see time. I need to see technology. And I immediately sent out to the staff. I'm like, I need something for 1.8 for technology. And I mean, within an hour, I bet I had 30 emails from staff with, here's a lesson, here's pictures of this, here's this. I mean, everybody was just all hands on deck with getting this done. And so that's where it feels really like it was a collective effort, which then also helped us, I think, tremendously with 1.3 and 1.5, which although we're not different priorities, that's about teacher and staff input, formal and informal, into the school. It was a priority for our building because we always want our teachers to feel like they have input. And what we learned through this process is that, like I think we marked 1.3 as, maybe it's 1.5. Okay, that was an area of strength. 1.5 was an area of growth. And what we learned through that process is that we had a lot of opportunities, but staff weren't necessarily using them. And the reason they weren't using them is because they didn't really see what difference it made. So again, getting that data back to staff. So, a cell phone policy, that was one thing that we had a meeting on. We said, what do you think? What do you want? We surveyed. We brought it back to staff. We came to a decision. We surveyed students. We've given them, and even this year, we give them the cell phone data back so they know how many referrals have come in. So I think it's just that loop, and we were missing that giving the feedback to staff, and so then they felt like there's no point in giving any input. So I think really it was just the need to have the whole staff involved in the HRS actually helped us achieve 1.3 and 1.5 to get that input. An area that I know we're still lagging at the secondary level at middle school is that parent input. And I think that's just, it's a beast at junior high. I'm hoping it gets better with the 6 through 8 so that it doesn't feel like such a blip on parents' radar. The parents, it's interesting to me that they graded it as an area. When I talk to, it's an area of growth. When I talk to PSTO, they all say, well, it's fine. If we had something to say, we would. That we don't give you any input because we don't have any input. And so it's been tricky. We've got a lot of things out there. Again, we're not finding that parents are using them. So that's just an area that we want to continue to work on because we definitely want parents to feel like your input matters. We want you to know what's going on. But I feel really, really proud of 1.1 and 1.2 for the feeling of safe, supportive, and collaborative. Where I'm still a little bit stuck is I think parents are just, well, I assume it's okay there. Because they're not in the building. And so that's just still something that as a staff we continue to talk about is how can we be really transparent? How can we make sure students or that parents know, what's going on and that they understand, what our expectations are, the rules, the procedures, and everything that goes into feeling safe. I think the other thing that was a little bit different for secondary was 1.4, and that's the PLC work. PLCs or collaborative teams have been the norm in elementary schools for a long time, but much more difficult with the master schedule at the secondary level. That was something that at Southeast we had really started focusing on even before HRS, but again, what HRS gave us is instead of just having pockets of teams invested in that work, it put everybody on the same page, and that's been huge. And to see the building shift and the collective shift and the investment from everyone in the building versus this team's all in and this team's all in has been, I think, really, really huge. And again, eye-opening for me this year as we continue to get feedback. There were some teams that I'm like, they're rocking it. Like, this is my all-star team. And then as we get the data and we start looking, it's like, you guys got a lot of work to do, which is okay. Like, and they were really grateful for that. And I think that some of the accountability that we have through, like, the SIG, which is this thing from the district, our strategic implementation guide, has really just allowed people to see, this is where we're at, but this is where we need to go. So I just think overall, what being certified in level 1 has done for our building is just given us that accountability immediately and just the true dipstick to know how we're doing instead of just making assumptions and going on what our gut tells us.
Can you talk a little bit, if it's appropriate, to say what you think about student input
Yeah.
has led you to yet or not?
Has what now?
Has led you to or?
Yeah, the student input has been huge, and I think we have always tried to get a lot of input from our students, but again, the piece we were missing is ever giving it back to them, so we might ask them, we've done surveys through our homeroom lessons for years, like how do you know, what do you think about this lesson, what do you think about this, but we weren't ever bringing it back to them. And so what was different when we started a lot of our work last year is we took the whole 1.2 HRS survey and we picked out like 3 questions, and those are the 3 that we said we're just gonna ask them every 6 weeks. So we would ask them in homeroom, we compile the data, we would analyze it and kind of come up with some themes, and then we would go back to homeroom with a lesson that said, okay, this is what you guys told us, tell us a little bit more about this, tell us what you need to see. And I think that that helped the students also get some ownership into, okay, they actually do care, they are trying, so then they were a little bit invested too. So for instance, our questions were, they ended up being very targeted on hallways. That's what students kept telling us felt the most chaotic was the hallways. And so we'd say, what do you need? I don't know, more adults, or we want to be recognized, whatever it was. So then we would implement something. And one thing we implemented was, we know we have hot spots where there's a ton of kids, so we would assign staff, like we would look at your schedule. Every staff is in the hallway, in their doorway, in between classes, but there are some areas where I might have 10 adults and like 15 kids, and then either we call it the pit, the bottom of the main stairs, where I've got 400 kids and 2 adults. So we made a schedule and we asked people during your prep, sign up, you're gonna go here, and that made a huge difference. And then when we went back and surveyed the kids, they said, well, what we noticed, Mr. Keller-Wilson was in the pit and we'd never seen him there before, and there were just more people. So I think it was not only getting that feedback from them, but then giving it back to them so that they felt like they were a part of the functioning of school.
So having staff in hallways in between classes really does help.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it is huge. And like I said, we have always had staff in the hallways, and we focus a lot on it needs to be active supervision. Like that, I mean, another thing that we did is to make sure it was active and you weren't just standing there talking to your teaching partner is we give out SOAR tickets and SOAR points, and so every day they had to make a tally of, okay, during this passing period, it could have been how many points did I give out, or how many kids did I talk to that aren't in my class. And so it would just kind of became, and then they go back in and tally, and we brought that to, I mean, we just tried to do some fun things like that. But, I mean, yes, just having the body there is huge, but our focus really has been on it has to be active.
Interaction.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Because otherwise what always happens is kids will say, well, Ms. Cook was standing right there and saw it, and they don't realize we can be standing right there, and if we're talking to someone, we don't see anything. And so we just really focused on, you've got to be interacting with kids, both that are coming in your door, but try to interact with some kids that you don't have, so that they start to form those relationships with every adult in the building.
Great.
Michelle, you mentioned this, and it's a question I've had. One of the things that I thought was really cool about HRS years ago when we were at Liberty for that highlight was the ability to collect not real-time data, but almost real-time data.
Yeah.
But then, and you referred to the legislature passing the survey law, which now constrains us. What are some of our limitations? Do we have any? What are they with collecting data from the students and remaining in compliance with the law? And is there a way for us to fix that so we can get back on track with what I think is one of the coolest parts of HRS?
That's been really hard, but we haven't done a single HRS survey or quick checks this year because we just aren't quite sure, because we're asking them, do you feel safe in the hallways? Do you feel supported? Like those were our quick checks. And so we tried sending out the same thing that sign up here if it's okay. And it was just a beast to try to figure out who said yes and who said no. So just to be safe right now, we haven't been able to collect any of that data. We haven't done any of the same quick checks that we did last year.
Is that something we can build into registration this spring?
Yes, hopefully we're gonna get some relief before that, here in the next couple of weeks, but, our long-term plan has been that to build that into the registration for Infinite Campus. We've looked at it for the district level, and so what we need to work with the building administrators on is how do we, capture enough of that information early enough that we can get it loaded in. Our plan is to have a generic question that I opt into any surveys that the district wants to give. But the law also requires us to provide the questions to the family to review. So if you say no, then we'd have to take another screen that would list all the different surveys. And that's where it would really become a heavy lift, Lisa, is because we'd have to be able to have all that on the front end. But that is that's our planned approach, is to get that approval. I mean, we haven't done our overall climate survey this year, and that's one of the reasons why. So those big ones are in some of our panorama work or some of our other screeners. But that's the plan, is to try to alleviate that when families register through Infinite Campus. And also probably clarifying, as we get more information through the DE rules, what we really have to get permission on and what we don't. How you're feeling today, we may be able to ask, right? We're not just trying to evaluate their mental state, because that's not the purpose of it. And so as we get more clarity from the DE around some of those rules also, we'll be able to look at that some more too.
I mean, does the DE understand some of the ways that these surveys are being like used and
Yes.
We hadn't seen any, I hadn't seen the rules on that before everything kind of got put on pause. I don't know.
I mean, they're doing the hearings for the proposed rulemaking on stuff like over winter break, right? So it'd be great participation, I'm sure, for folks during that time frame. But I mean, I think they do. It's really a target at the, more mental health end of things and the SCBH world. I think some of these more academic purposes, I don't think that's necessarily the spirit behind it. But I mean, part of this is we start registering, March, April timeframe. And so when they passed, these laws, we were already in the middle of registering. We tried to put out some parent permission. You guys probably noticed them hit your email, right? But we're only getting like 30% return rate, which we can't do anything with the survey we administer if we only get a 30% return rate. So we're kind of in limbo right now as far as that goes. But yeah, I think they understand some of the implications. We've obviously communicated, some of those things back to the DE, but I do think what you're seeing on a larger scale is, right, this is the way it's going to work with rules making rather than guidance, and we've talked about that before. So that seems to be their general flow. And I asked a question about timeline last week, and it does seem like it'll be that much delayed, right? So if we get a new piece of legislation this spring, it'll be probably January next year again before we get any rule, hearing or feedback opportunities. So we're going to be in this like little time warp or time delay scenario, kind of moving forward with that.
So do we have any kind of a fallback or alternative way of getting the information that principals are looking for? Are we stuck here?
I think the thing that we can probably replicate, Charlie, and I think Amber and Michelle both did a nice job of talking about this, is I think part of our hope as a district with HRS was, while we might not have all those specific data points to inform our systems, I think they have a sense of like system checks they can do, right? Like Michelle was talking about, rather than assuming, like we have systems and structures that have been in place for a long time, but just their wherewithal now to know, hey, I need to go in and check and see if this is actually functioning the way it should be, right? Or I can still ask teachers, their feedback and get some data points from them to know, is this really operating in the fashion we want? I mean, we've had SST team meetings for a long time, right, to system and look at kids' overall health, or PBIS meetings to look at areas in the building where there might be more referrals coming from. And we can still pull those data sources, right? It's just the part about asking the kids for the feedback, which is a little bit limited right now. But we probably all have informal structures we still ask for. We just can't do it through the survey mechanism.
Thanks for the hallway thing, I appreciated that. And so tell me a little bit about PLCs and kind of where, kind of what you're seeing, what's I get the logistics piece, and maybe this ties in a little bit to the work. Are we getting to like common assessments yet? Or are we like, so then my question is that going to be more of and bring to a district thing where we develop that and it goes down, or are PLCs doing that in buildings? Is that too broad?
No, it's actually a great segue. So,
Well,
no, it really is. What's next in HRS? So, hopefully you can tell just both by Amber and Michelle and how Lucas and Eliza started that we're very excited about this work. And to us, that's one indicator that this continues to be the right work that we're doing, and we continue to be committed to it. And so you see that first bullet, that the buildings are working through certification of level 1. Our 4 buildings that are certified, Wickham, Southeast City, and Borlaug so far. And our expectation is the rest of our buildings are certified in level 1 by the end of, or before the start of next school year, by August of 2024. And really, you've heard us use the term simultaneity several times, and unlike Lucas, that's actually a real word, not one that he
Just was
made
gonna
up.
say you just made up.
I know, but I wouldn't have clarified, but I felt like I had to. We used it out last year, and we started to use it this year, and now you're really gonna start to see what we mean by that. Because our buildings living in level 1 are getting certified. Really, as you talk about your staff, just your general teaching staff, and even our principals as they work with their whole staff, we truly want them to continue to live in level 1, because it's not just about getting certification. It's about, as Matt said, circling back around and making sure those processes continue in place, whether it's the folks giving out sword tickets in the pit, or what Amber's doing with Carline before and after school. So it's not just about getting the certification, it's really embedding that in the culture of our buildings at that level 1. And so you have our teachers in general and our buildings living in that domain. But on top of that, we're also starting to do increase our learning and our work around level 2 and level 3. And JP, this is where we kind of get to your question and starting to marry level 1 into level 2, and that's the effective teaching in every classroom. And you've heard us start talking about the new art and science of teaching, which is our defined model of instruction. And we're inviting, as the slide says, Tina Bogren back to the district in January. She did our kickoff this fall and was fantastic. People loved her, the staff loved her, and so she's going to come back and help us with our work in that area. And so while the general, our general staff is still living in level 1, we have a group of our leaders, our building leaders, their IDS and their leadership teams that are going to really start looking at this level 2 work and diving into the elements of NASOT and how we start connecting those. And we will use our collaborative teams to start working through those and bringing those forward. But again, it's a slow process intentionally, because we want it to be a living, breathing part of what we do as a district. Part of level 2 is also having an evaluation system that is tied to or aligned with NASOT. So Nick Proud, HR, is leading that work again in conjunction with Brady and our building leaders about what does that look like when we change our evaluation model to ensure that it's aligned to what we think is important. And of course, if we're going to do that, then we also have to provide the resources to our teachers so they can have that success. And so on the surface, we have our buildings living in level 1 and getting certification level 1, but then we have all this other work going on behind the scenes in terms of how we're preparing and connecting to level 2 as we really tune in and focus on effective teaching in every classroom. And because that's not enough, right? I haven't mentioned Carmen yet. Then we have Carmen and her team, and it's not up there, also looking at what we're doing in level 3 and our guaranteed and viable curriculum, and starting to unpack our priority standards, and then how that ties into our expectations around quality teaching in the classroom. Even though we've set out a linear approach for when we're going to be certified, we would never get there in a timely fashion if we completed all the work at level 1, then moved to level 2, then moved to level 3. They're so entwined, and one of the things that's great about our district is Amber and Michelle both talked about, we have some of these processes already in place, and so it's given us a nice springboard to the work that we're doing. But we are trying to move forward. And one of the things that you probably heard Matt and me and the team talk about is, one of the things about HRS is this dichotomy between both accountability and autonomy at the building level. And
providing the buildings the opportunity to kind of lead their own path towards some of these areas, as long as we have the non-negotiables established from a district perspective, and then us holding them accountable for that work. And certification is one of the ways that we're able to do that. And so it just adds to another piece of that work as we move it forward. I know that didn't get specifically to your
Jason,
question
back
about.
there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, when you, like your question specifically, we don't have those
Right.
common summative assessments yet, but as a collaborative team, that's a fraction of the work that you're doing. As like a proud father moment, like a year ago at this particular time, we were identifying all the barriers for secondary, for junior high and high school teachers of why people can't meet. And I would love to meet, but I don't have a team. And it's just amazing at this point, less than a year later, that every person in our district, every teacher, started off with somebody to meet with, whether it be in their building or virtually with somebody else. And it's a huge shift because we eliminated almost every single barrier that they had. So while they don't have the summative assessments necessarily that they're working through right now, that doesn't mean they don't have the classroom assessments that they're working through or other pieces of the data that they're collaborating around.
So will those assessments come from those teams? I mean, I guess that's a little bit like, are they, so will Southeast Science Department have something totally different than Northwest, or is there some guidance from the district?
So, go ahead.
The common summative is what we're going from the district space to kind of make sure we have that full alignment for the guaranteed and viable curriculum, but we are encouraging those PLC teams to create common formatives.
Yep.
So as they're working through their PLC and going through that question number one of looking at the priority standards, what do we want students to know, do, and understand, as a team, they can look and talk through like, what do I do for my kids in my classroom, what are you doing, what really works? Now together, maybe we want to create a common formative that we can use for our PLC team, that we can all give our assigned students, and then look at that data and then determine exactly where's the curriculum, are we working through the curriculum, are we providing the right interventions, or are we doing what we need to do to kind of help students extend that learning? And so
when you talk about those barriers, and that you've gotten rid of all of them, I mean,
Not
that
all,
sounds,
maybe not all, but I would say the majority of them, yeah.
Look, I'm in secondary, finding a common prep with 3 teachers, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So what, I guess, is there anything maybe the board could do? Are there any bigger systemic changes that will help that work? Calendar, time, all these things like that we could do to help kind of clear away some of just the logistical hurdles to getting people together.
Unless you had some, but, so one thing, kind of building on Lucas's proud dad moment over here, like, how many emails did you guys get complaining about teachers meeting PLC teams? None,
0.
right? And, like, that's not normal, is what I would say, from being in other districts as you started PLCs,
Yeah.
right? And so, I think what the goal is, right, as we approach these different topics, is that we do identify those barriers and then we try to work through them, right? I mean, it would have been very easy to look at level 1 of HRS and say, well, we're gonna do PLCs right now, right? And that's not necessarily the way we went about it, right? And I think the best case scenario, we want people asking to meet in those teams. We want people to see the need to meet in those teams. I think that to answer your common formative assessment question or common summative assessment question is, we want them asking for that too, right? That we'd want them to see the value of why that would be something meaningful and important for them to do it, so that we're not necessarily saying you have to go give this assessment, right? And that might not work perfectly in every scenario. It's probably going to get a little touchy when we talk about attaching an instructional framework to their evaluation. I mean, that's going to get uncomfortable on some level, right? Because then we're getting into people's teaching and trying to improve practice and some of that. But I would say our general philosophy as we try to approach these matters is we want people to see the need for why it's valuable and what it can do, not only for their performance, but of course the achievement of kids, right? And so if we keep approaching it that way, we hope to make your job easy on this, that we don't need to ask for a lot of those things and just force a change. Because if we force a change, what do we get, right? We get compliance to the change rather than commitment. And I think Michelle even talked about that with some of her PLC teams, right? She had some that were up and going, but now she has everybody in her building meeting in PLC teams, right? And they're probably all on different journeys.
Can I
but-
jump in real
Yeah.
quick, just because I think, to piggyback on what you just said, like, I mean, I think you nailed it. Like, I have teachers now asking, and I think because they saw the power that, as a collective group, we had with level 1, and some of like the 1.1, 1.2, some of those easy fixes. So, for instance, we have just spent, like the performance profile report cards came out. We have met with all 4 of our core areas before break. We'll meet with every other area after break, and I mean, Lucas, you had a proud dad moment. I had like the proudest mom moment. I mean, these teams were like, and credit to Carmen's team, because they were like looking at our data, looking at our scores and saying, we need to meet with our curriculum coordinator. We want to know what the ISASS was asking. We want our common formative assessments to have DOK 3 and 4, not DOK 1 and 2. We want a TQ day. We want to throw all of our stuff on the table and say, am I teaching a standard? Am I not? And so again, it's them seeing, and I think that the reason, I don't know that if we wouldn't have gotten the progress and the success with other areas in level 1, they would have seen that power of that collective effort. And so they truly are asking for that work. And even the non-tested area, science and social studies, were amazing with, well, show us the standards, show us the ELA standards, show us the math standards. It's got to be cross-curricular. We've got to be able to help with this. And I mean, Carmen, your team has been amazing in supporting our work. Samaya's been awesome with language arts. And so it's exactly like what Matt said, is now the teams they're seeing the need, and they're seeing not just the need, but they're seeing the power of working collectively. And I truly think that's just because our building would not have gotten certified, I don't want to say so quickly because it was a lot of work, but if it wouldn't have been a collective effort.
And that's where I think we keep power in, like, when I think about like people's efficacy in their work, like believing they can make a difference. Because if we just go back to the APR we showed you guys, and that's all we worked with our staff on, there's probably not a whole lot of efficacy to build in your work there, right? I mean, some of those data points seem very similar to things we've looked at before. So what are those, that's weird, got a bug in here all of a sudden. It's too cold for bugs. Yeah, gross, yeah. Anyways, but they wouldn't see that progress, right? Like here they see an immediate impact point. Michelle goes back to them today and say, look what I asked you to do, and look at the data that's different in 2 weeks because of our supervision, right? And you built on something that's a little bit safer, right? Like we're not touching your teaching position with the first, or your teaching practices with the first step in this process. Now we're going to get into something that's probably a little bit riskier for you, but you can trust the process that we went through with the improvement work. And so if you stay committed to that, then we have a better chance at a conversation about how we improve instruction, of course, improve achievement for kids.
And it'll be easier on the question that Nick is working on, that we're working with the evaluation and the instructional model. If you're in a team and you're able to really work with that team in a collaborative way and look at student achievement, it's going to be a lot less scarier for the individual teacher who maybe is struggling in a certain area, but in their weekly team meetings they're getting advice and feedback from their teammates. That's a lot easier for any of us, probably, certainly for teachers, to get that feedback. Yeah, social studies people, I asked them that question. How often are you meeting? Yes, we're meeting. How often? I collected a bunch of survey data. Yep, weekly. And some of them, this is secondary, some more, are you using common formative assessments at the building level? Yes, almost unanimously and universally was yes, on common formative.
Yep.
Are you common summative at the building levels? That was majority, supermajority, yes.
Wow.
Do you know what other people in the district are doing? That one was sort of a no, but that's like, okay, well, there's an area then we got to say, our next meeting, our task then was said, okay, you have to refine a CFA, bring that to the next meeting, because we have to start sharing this, because you're having successes, no one's complaining about working in the collaborative teams, but we're not utilizing the opportunities to share that work.
So you're not hearing any complaints either?
No.
Really? Yeah, so this is, right, me assuming it's going well because you don't hear those things.
Yeah.
But then checking back, and it, again, continues to keep me pumped up about this because of all of these things. These are sustainable things. These are things that can continue because now it's just the way we do business, and because we can look back at data and we can show growth. And I've always believed teachers, especially if they can see that it works for kids, they're going to be all in, right?
Yeah, and you're prioritizing time to collaborate with your colleagues. I mean, that's really what you're saying, that has a structure that maybe you didn't have before, but that's all right. And that's, that's where you can say to folks, do you want more time to collaborate with your colleagues to help students learn? Yeah, of course. I mean, we have that time.
And it's in guaranteed and viable. It's not just content. Teachers will have time. At my work, I'm always like, and exactly. When will we do this?
That's the other thing we're finding in the survey data that's really important. If you ask teachers on some of the level 1, level 2 work and then in the level 3 and the pacing, because we're doing it with simultaneity, they are sort of saying like, okay, our pacing guides maybe they're off a little bit. We probably aren't able to do all the things that we thought we would be able to do as we identified and started to unpack the priority standards. Awesome. What an awesome thing to now better understand. Then some of those are going to become supporting standards, but because you've lived it and they've had a chance to live it and own it, it's just different, for
And I
them.
think to add one more beautiful thing to this whole conversation is because the secondary schools are in their PLC process, right? Elementary has been there for a while. So in our building, it's more, now they're asking to get into each other's classrooms to see teaching,
Yeah.
right? And so we've already taken that step, and now it's part of like, my CDP is aligned to a NASOT element, and I know that Eliza is, or I've heard that Eliza is really good at this element, can I go see her? Absolutely, I'll go in and cover your class so that can happen, right? And so that's the next layer that happens, and it's happening organically, right?
Yeah.
Like they're asking for that.
Michelle,
stuff.
can I ask, what do your special ed teachers do for PLC?
I think that's been an area where we've made a lot of progress. So we've got, they meet as a special ed team, but then we also have special ed teachers attend the content PLC specifically right now for math, language arts, and literacy because we have co-teaching. And we used to just do one period was co-taught, and we just, for many reasons, that model wasn't working. So now, because they attend the PLC and they know sort of the plan for the week and what's going on, and they've helped develop the strategies, they just have a period, like it might be that Josh has second period where he co-teaches, and there might be 3 or 4 different classrooms that he could go into. So it's not assigned to just one classroom, which also helps us not overload a class with need. Mm-hmm. And so we just picked one period of the day, and we have like 3 special ed teachers who sort of specialize in math, or they've said, I'll take math, and we have like 3 for reading and language arts. And so that has been, and I will say when our last TQ day that we did with Math 7 was the area we picked because they don't have a prescribed curriculum right now, they'll get one next year. We invited our ELL teacher and the special ed teacher who co-teach for those sections, and it was amazing. Just the input from those 2 about when we put the assessment up there, like, okay, this might be an ISASP assessment, how accessible is it for kids? I mean, the knowledge and the input that they brought was outstanding, and it just, I feel like it's accelerated our work tremendously.
I really like that idea about the co-teaching.
Yeah.
That they could go
There, it's
to
not just one
or
class.
two, because the overloading is such a problem.
Maybe back to your original question, JP, about what the board can do too. I guess another thing I would just think about, I always feel like we kind of nerd out with you guys when we talk about this. 'Cause this is like,
Well,
We went to
a
acronym
little
in there.
but,
right?
I mean, I don't know, I needed this meeting tonight just to, just because I think there's a lot of inspirational stuff in here, and I do think this is the work that we get excited about, right, and the systems and processes around it. And so I think the ask would be just to protect the time to do this, right? That there's just other things when they come to us, like I think you see a lot of nodding heads from the educators in this room that believe in their heart of hearts that this is the right work to do, right? That other things that come in and compete for our time, energy, and efforts they pale in comparison to the power in this work, right? Because there's really nothing surprising in these first 3 levels, but there's a reason it hasn't been done, right? There's a reason we don't have those common formative assessments. There's a reason we weren't meeting in PLC teams. There's a reason that we hadn't even identified priority standards consistently across the district for 10 years, right? I mean, and all of that is because it's not like we thought the other things we're doing were bad, but it was competing with what is really the core mission of the work. And so I think keeping the main thing is probably what we can all do, right, to help make sure that they can do the good work with kids in the buildings.
Matt, if you're saying protecting time, what was the time spent on before that now you have protected time to pursue this?
I think it's more like when we think there's like one of those shiny object moments where it's a new program we're going to try and we're going to implement and put in, right? And I think we could, I don't want to pick on any one of them because we have some of them still, but when we think that's going to be the cure-all solution, right? It's not. I mean, it might make us feel better for a year or two that we've implemented something new and that we're trying really hard with it, but our timeline's long. It's a 6 to 10 year timeline, right, of the work. And so I think that's the thing, is just not to get a distracted focus about this is going to be the next new flashy thing for teaching and learning that's going to make a difference for our kids. Those all might be good things and they can have some impact points, but usually they die when the person that's passionate about them changes jobs or leaves, right? This has the ability to sustain any of us, switching out positions in the room.
We've never articulated a district-wide instructional model.
No,
So how do we even talk about instruction?
Yeah,
together,
and
right?
so
Yeah.
this is part of that work, which is pretty remarkable.
And
that we've had.
here's what I love that we're not hearing, because, look, I've been in meetings with lots of, I may myself have vented a time or two about something or some.
I may have been in those meetings with you.
So that we're not hearing that, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not like teachers are shy. I don't think they're,
No.
shy to contact the board or certainly have a private conversation. So the fact that it isn't happening, the fact that people are organically asking for these things, again, because they see it impact kids, and I really think, to me, the big thing, like, we'll honor your time. Like, that's, because teaching is always nothing but piling on.
Mhm.
One more thing, one more thing, one more thing, and you just, okay, so we do nothing well, and this is, again, just it finally admits, we're not gonna do it all, let's do these things well, and teachers are gonna struggle, because I'm in it too, in science, right, at
Yeah.
work, and my teacher, who's hyper biology nerd, is like, but we're not gonna, and we might not get to it all, but look what they learned today on this
Right.
thing, like, look at that, and it's exciting, and so I know I will not go for the shiny object. I've hit it, and I love that it's a 6 to 10 year timeline, and that feels honest, like honest work, sustainable work over the long haul.
Yeah, and I would say for the board too, just my perspective, and on behalf, it is a lot of work. I mean, that is the other thing, is that it is a substantial amount of work at all parts of the organization. I mean, central office down to building admin, to teachers, paras. So that's the other thing in protecting the time, to say, I mean, that's a massive amount of work. And it's hard to like convey just how much of an investment of time and, talent that is. But
Michelle threw out the
it really
term
is.
DOK, depth of knowledge.
Depth
Like,
of
we could
knowledge.
spend 2 hours talking about what depth
Oh
of
my
knowledge
gosh,
questions are, right, and the different levels of them, right? And that's not even something we touched on here tonight, so.
Yeah, just a
it's
massive
absolutely
amount.
right.
So just know that, I mean, when we're doing it, it's sort of like, okay, we're going like, I think, just my perspective, it's easy also to get input from the public that can be very beneficial and valuable, of course, but then that leads to probably every board says to the central office, then, well, you gotta do this, 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 and this as well. That's which is, sometimes that's appropriate, but I'd also protect that time as well, to say these are the priorities, because it isn't. Like, it doesn't just happen magically because we have PLC teams that meet at the secondary. It's up and down the system. You have to have that focus.
Well, and to piggyback on this, I think when we started this 3 years ago, we got feedback from teachers that this was the new bright shiny thing.
Oh,
And they
gotcha.
were not interested at all in working on it, and they were just gonna sit in the corner and wait for the next new bright shiny
Yeah.
thing, because this is not it's not here to stay. And I think what I'm hearing from you guys especially is that everybody has now embraced it, and it's not the bright new shiny thing, it's the thing that our admin and our teachers and our building admin all really believe in. And so to do what you're cautioning us not to do, right? To move our eyes off the ball and pick a new bright shiny thing, I think would be devastating to our teachers. And at this point in time, I think they believe us, that we're really bought into it, and they've bought into it. And so I think shifting at this point would be really detrimental. But I think what's important for us at the board, I'm not sure the parents know about HRS yet. I think they're going to start hearing about HRS, and I think we might get some blowback, not blowback, but that same like, oh, this is the bright new shiny thing from the parents, and say, hey, why are we doing this? Let's not spend time and I think that it's important for me at least to say, nope, this is the horse that we all picked, and it's a 6 to 10 year plan, and we're gonna see it through. Because I think it's so great to have you guys here and hear about it working and succeeding, and so.
I love to hear about all of the collaboration and being excited about collaborating. And you indicated that a lot of this was just firming up everything that you're doing, and making sure that the staff knew what the processes were. The other attendance centers that haven't yet certified, how is that a similar situation with them, do you think, or are there any buildings that maybe have more work to do, for example? Okay, you're nodding. Okay.
Yeah, I think.
I'm just curious, yeah.
I mean, I think you could easily put our buildings on a continuum, Jane, right?
Okay.
Without and I know you're not asking for specifics,
No.
but yeah, you'd think, or just think about leadership turnover, right? Like a new principal stepping into a new situation, like they may find some systems and structures in place, some that aren't, right? But yeah, I would say we're in very different spots depending on the building, and some of that leadership stability could contribute to it, or there could be other factors that just, contribute to it too. So I would say they are in different places. I mean, these two were two of our, go-getters right away, on this thing. And so I think it spoke to them because they probably had a lot of, pieces and places that they were already headed that were similar to the HRS framework. But yeah, I think you'd see some of our buildings in very different places and had more sizable work to do for sure. But like Chase had communicated, I mean, our expectation is still that they all reach that point by August and that they're committed to improving this system. So any different takes on that?
No, what I'd add, and I mentioned the autonomy piece earlier, and this is kind of where I was going with it, is that our buildings are different spots, and that's okay. Our job at the district level is to set some of these benchmarks, and Eliza and Lucas are doing a nice job of checking in with the buildings along the way so that we can monitor their progress and then provide some supports and some additional guidance if they need that. But having these points in time where we do expect folks to be certified in level 1 or to moving on to the next area, while at the same time, Amber gave some great examples, because we look at level 2 and some of the things we've already started articulating at the building level is that supports for NASOT is that every teacher has the opportunity to go in and watch a colleague teach, or to have somebody come in and watch them teach. We're not going to hold them up from doing that, and so it provides that flexibility where we have this framework that then the principals can move kind of at their own pace that their building is ready to go at. A little bit slower than some, or a little bit faster than others, but we're all kind of moving towards that same perspective. Yes, if we get to May and we have some buildings that aren't there, we have then a leadership team at the district level that can come in and provide the supports and to help them continue to move forward. But we don't want it to be something where every building has to be in the exact same spot at the exact same time. Right now, level 1 and level 2. Now, level 3, because summative assessment is a little bit different, we've talked about that, but right now, we want to play on the strengths of our individual buildings as they move through those networks. And one of the things that allows us to do that, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, I'm like you, like we start talking, and I can't remember what we talked about, is the use of our common language. So our buildings are in different spaces or different areas, but we're still now talking the same language across the district and across the buildings. And so even if my building's not in the same spot as Matt's, we're talking about it conceptually the same way. And that's really been a benefit too, as we talk about how we align the work, is having that common language across all our buildings at all levels.
The other unique thing I was thinking about when you asked that question is too, they're getting different data back, right, based on those surveys too. And so some of the work identified in each building is very different based on how, parents, students, or staff would have responded in those scenarios. And we've, covered why we're missing the student piece now, but some of that staff and parent data is going to be.
And they're trying to figure out
work.
what areas for them are, areas that are strengths or areas that need improvement and what that means. And I mean, it's not that they're not doing the work, it's probably just thinking about it, how to get their team together and figure out, okay, if we said this isn't an area of strength, it's an improvement area for us, what are the indicators that we're looking at? So I think, part of it is just, they're just working through the process.
I'm curious, this wouldn't be an accurate assessment, of course, because it's not survey data, but how do you feel about just the feel of your building? Like, is the hallway, is it different? Do you notice like a difference, how's the pulse of it, say, the culture?
I can just say my building's completely different this year, and I'm not gonna say that's all HRS. I mean, obviously, 50% of our building changes over every year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you walk into South, it's a totally different building this year, and everybody has noticed it. And I think that part of it is just the culture. Like, every year, we get kids that are more and more used to school again. I mean, the COVID lag was huge, and so every year we get kids that now have built up a little more stamina. But there's no question that, I mean, this year, I mean, I guarantee, I mean, I would put money on it. You could ask any single person in my building, and they would tell you hands down this year is 1,000 times better than last year. And yes, there's lots of reasons for that, but I think they would also say we are united as as a staff, more than we have ever been. Like, that is something that they bring back to me all the time. And I have a feedback form in my newsletter that goes out every week, and every couple of weeks they say something about, it feels so good that we're all on the same page. It feels so good that we're all using common language for this. It feels so good that we're all tight on this. And so I just think that unity piece has been huge.
And I would agree with that. I think the staff input and decision-making, which is all part of level one, figuring out those systems and then taking that input and decision-making back to the teachers and being transparent with that and upfront, I think bonded us a little bit more than what it had in previous years. So I don't know that I would say, like, if you walk into the building, do you feel a significant change from last year? I don't know that I would feel that, other than I think the staff feel different, feel like they've maybe given more input or decision-making within that level one.
You probably wouldn't notice it as much at the elementary level as
Maybe not,
the
yeah.
secondary, where they're
Yeah.
changing classes. So, yeah,
Sure.
but, nice.
Any other comments?
I think that's what we have for you tonight,
Yeah.
so I think we got to the end, yeah, thank you.
Wow.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.